Okay, I am Linda Marie Patricia Therese Catanzaro Boberg, and I was born March 17th, 1955, which I repeat all the time anymore, in Waukegan, Illinois, in, God, I can't remember the name, a Catholic hospital. My mother would not name me Patricia because she was afraid that if I grew up and was big, kids would tease me and call me Fat Pat Cat. And I used to think that was funny, but as I got older and as I became a bigger woman, I was very grateful that my mom had that foresight. So that was my start in life. My mother had an awful delivery and then went home to great-grandma Parker's house for 2 weeks. And I don't know who took care of me during those 2 weeks, but my mom couldn't handle pain or anything really medical very well. So Linda got sent somewhere, and I don't think I nursed or anything like that, the way my aunt tells it. So
what can you tell us? Obviously, you probably don't remember, but you probably heard a lot. What were your parents like when you came about, or when you were really young? What were your early memories of your parents? What were they like?
Well, my dad, I'll always remember my dad as a generous, funny man, very heavy. But he was always fun. He always played with us, tickled us, took us places, bought us. I'll never forget when McDonald's became a big deal. All of us would pile in the station wagon, and Dad would go in and he'd order 20 hamburgers and 20 fries and 20 Cokes. You didn't get any choice until McDonald's came out with better things like, double quarter pounders with cheese. Then you got a choice, but then you were older. But Dad was fun, and he was not a man who thought, oh, these are girls, so therefore I'm not going to do stuff with him that he would have done with a son. And I'm grateful for that. So I got to shoot a gun. I asked if I could shoot a gun. He took me out to the gun place and did the basic explanation, and then had me fire a gun. And I never want to do it again because it hurt. It hurt my shoulder. I don't know which shoulder, but hurt. And he took us to Boy Scout activities, woke us up early in the morning, and if we wanted to go, we went. And he was a Boy Scout master for 13 years, so we had lots of boys in the house for evening meetings, but they were fun. And I remember my dad has fun, and he had rules about campouts that really the Boy Scouts of America follow today. Like he would not let men sleep in tents with young kids, and he would never allow a father to sleep with his son because he just was worried about how that would be, and he wanted to keep it cool. So the men slept with the men, the boys slept with the boys, kind of thing. And, he was good. He was good at that stuff. And so that's my young memory. My favorite memory of my dad, though, is he was in the National Guard for over 22, I think it's 22 years, might be 26. He joined right before he got married, and he did so because he was afraid of being drafted because of the Korean War. And then as it turned out, there were 2 units, and they called the other unit up to serve in Korea, but not my dad's. But he had to do these weekend, whatever they were called, training or whatever. So he'd be gone a whole weekend and then 2 weeks every summer. And he came home one morning. It was really early, but I do remember we had bunk beds, and I was in the top bunk. Probably Mary Kay was in the bottom. And he came in, and I was wide awake, and I was like, "Oh, Daddy!" And he pulled me up into his arms and hugged me, and it's the most beautiful memory because the bathroom was right across the hall, and the sun was shining in, and he was a great guy. So my mom, as a young woman, had gray hair by the time she was 23. Perfectly salt and pepper gray hair. And she dyed it, and she would allow us to curl her hair every day. And she curled her hair every day and took those curlers out before my dad came home from work. So she was all put together. Like her hair was nice, her makeup was good, her lipstick was on, and she was a pretty woman, and she really knew how to make my dad feel good. when he came home from work. She was not a good cook, and which is where I probably get it. But she could make spaghetti sauce like an army for an army, and she could make a roast. But we didn't eat anything fancy. We never ate casseroles, and she always said it was because Dad didn't like them. But I think Mom didn't want to put them together. And she didn't work. She didn't have a car, and she was depressed. I know that now, looking back, my mom was probably pretty depressed most of her life. She had a rough kind of childhood, and just, then married a man who put her way out in McHenry County in a place that was near nothing. And here was a Chicago girl who had grown up to be able to walk to the corner and get a candy bar if you wanted to, and suddenly she's stuck. And we didn't have a second car until I was maybe a teenager, so she was really stuck. And as she got older and I recognized the depressive symptoms and I learned about them, I realized my mom was very depressed. She was a good mom. She loved us. I loved her. I always think I was her favorite. Sorry, guys. But anyway, so those are my parents.
So you've mentioned your sisters. Who are they, and when did they come into your life?
Okay.
What was it like being the big sister too?
Well, I'm in the perfect position because I'm a nag and a bossy older sister down to a T. And I'm sure my sisters would agree with me, but I'm perfect for that role. Sorry, guys. So Mary Kay came 13 months after me, Mary Catherine, and she was, as a little girl, very scared of animals. That's what I remember most. So we'd go to the bus stop together because we were 1 year apart in school. 1 year we had the same teacher. They blended it. But she would hide behind me if a dog came in sight. And I never could figure that out, but that's how she was. And she and I probably had the closest relationship. I mean, it's between her and, I don't know. I can't really say which one of my sisters I was closest to, but, Mary Kay definitely in later years. Debbie was the third one, and she came in 1959, so I think it was 2 years after Mary Kay was born, she came. And Debbie was sick. She had eye issues, she had lung issues, she had breathing issues, throat issues. And so she grew up learning to say, I can't, I'm sick, or whatever. And the Mary Kay and I, and then as the others joined us, we were just like, well, this is Debbie. And, she was in the hospital a couple times. And one time, very seriously, she almost died. And they called my parents back. And fortunately, they saved her. I don't know that whole story, except that I do remember they were called back suddenly. And whenever my parents left us, usually the Catanzaro, which would be Patrick's great-great-grandparents, would come and would stay with us. And they were only like 20 minutes away. But there were a couple times when they would say, just sit here, Grandma's on the way, and rush out the door. And I think that Debbie incident was one of them, because I remember feeling very frightened, not just for Debbie, but for the fact that we were by ourselves. So Jeannie came in 1950. Oh God, I can't remember the dates anymore. 59. And she was a Halloween baby. I don't really remember much about her birth. I remember my mother nursing her. And I remember that she was mischievous, kind of like little Miss Eliana. So she would run, like for instance, Christmas time, she was a toddler. I think she was about Eliana's age. So this would be 18 months or 17 months. And it was Christmas time. And, she had to be older than that. Maybe she was 1.5. I don't know. Anyway, she stole Mary Kay's candy. And throughout her life, Jeannie has hidden candy and eaten it. Sorry, Jean. So that's my memory of her as a little girl. Angela, I remember, she was born around the time of President Kennedy, because my great-grandmother Galante, who would be Patrick's great-great-grandmother Galante, was living with my grandparents, Catanzaro. She was infirm. She couldn't walk very well. Actually, later in life, I thought she and Dad had similar problems with balance and walking and whatever. But anyway, the story with that was Mom's pregnant with Angela, and they don't know what to name her. And great grandma says, "You should name her Carolyn, because if Carolyn is a good enough name for President Kennedy's daughter, it's a good enough name for your daughter." And everybody nodded. And I don't know how old I was, but later in the car I said, "Mom, isn't Grandma's name Carolyn?" So, and Angela came home, and I remember her as kind of being kind of a Alaskan. That's the only way I can talk. Real dark hair and the kind of slanty eyes, which babies sometimes have at birth, and that. And then she got into everything. She climbed on everything. She got into everything. She would not sleep at night, so you'd get up in the middle of the night and Mom and Dad would be up with her. Oh, it was horrible. So that's Angela. Roseanne was born, I was in 6th grade. I was so excited to have another sister. I've always loved babies. And so Roseanne was born, and the story there goes. So great-grandma Catanzaro, my grandma Catanzaro, came over to stay the night. And she must have come in the middle of the night because she wasn't there the night before. And Mom had the baby, and the next morning we all got up, and Grandpa, my dad, is telling the story of how a nurse came into the waiting room and said, "We're doing a survey, sir." And this was a time when men did not go into the delivery room. My dad never witnessed a birth. And anyway, this nurse said, "So, what color hair do you think your baby will have?" "Oh, it'll be blonde." And she started to right away get real snarky with my dad. "Okay, so what color eyes do you think she'll have?" "Blue." "All right, last question. How big is this baby going to be?" 9 pounds. And he was right on every one of them. And, you had to give him credit. I mean, his wife had 5 other kids. So, but Roseanne was a bit of a hellion in certain circumstances, but my mom had made this rule that Mary Kay and Debbie and I were to take a turn with the baby every morning because my mom didn't get up early. And so we were supposed to feed her. And 9 times out of 10, Roseanne would come to me instead of go to Debbie or Mary Kay. It was because she knew I'd get up with her. And I enjoyed it, but it was sometimes difficult, especially for my mom, because she was following my discipline orders more than my mother's, and I was not Mom. But anyway, she's love. I love Roseanne too. And then the final baby was Connie, and Connie came when I was in my first year of high school. We got off the bus one day and walked to the house, and there was Dad home from the hospital, and he said that Mom had the baby, and what we're going to name the baby. And he wanted to name the baby Constance after my mother. And several of my little sisters did not like that idea, and so he said, "Well, what would you call her? We can give her a nickname." So first was Sylvia, and I think that might have been Angela's idea, because Angela loved my Aunt Terry's sister, whose name was Sylvia, and she was a beautiful Italian girl. But my dad didn't like the name Sylvia. So then it went around and around, and I don't know who finally came up with Buffy. Sorry, Connie. But we called her Buffy from that day forward till she finally told us at 18 years old that she was no longer Buffy. Buffy was dead. And you can't blame her, because now she's, in her 50s, and who wants to call an adult woman Buffy, or wants to be called Buffy if you're an adult woman? So those are my sisters.
So let's just go through the progression of decades then. So what do you remember about your life as a preteen? I mean, that's 50 plus years ago now. So
yeah, preteen.
Do you remember it as a joyous time? Do you remember it as a lot of work? Do you remember it as sisters dogpiling on you?
No, preteen. I remember.
So this is before 1965.
Right. So I remember my mom had this rule that we would all do housework, assigned housework. So like after dinner, One of us washed dishes, one of us dried dishes. One of us dusted everything on a certain day. There were rules. And I do remember that I resented it sometimes. And one time, my Grandma Parker, my mom said, Linda, do this. And my mom was very directive. Do this. She was a mother. She was not a friend. She made that crystal clear. And so I went to do it thinking, okay, Mom told me to do this. And I heard my Grandma Parker say, you're too hard on that girl. And I thought, yeah, but partly it was me because I knew the other sisters didn't like to dust or do the dishes part. We didn't have a choice. We had to do it the way it was scheduled. But things like cleaning the house or taking care of the babies or helping Mom do laundry or that, it was directed toward us, but occasionally you could get out of it and say, I'm sick, I don't feel good, or whatever it was. But then my teenage years, I just remember riding the bus back and forth to Marion Central Catholic High School in Woodstock. And it was, 25 or 30 miles away? That's insane. I would never do that to a kid. But I wanted to go to that school, and we were never going to leave the house we lived in. So you get up really early. Dad would wake us up. We would catch a bus into McHenry and then catch another bus to Marion. And then on the way home, the first 2 years, there was no bus from McHenry to Holiday Hills, where we lived, which was about 7 miles outside of town. So we would have to sit in the library or in Baskin Robbins and wait for my dad to come get us at 5:45. And we did it. Mary Kay and I did it. I did it. Mary Kay and I did it. I don't remember if Debbie did it or not. It seemed like the third year we finally got a bus. There were enough kids out our way that Marion paid for a bus, or we paid for the bus from Marion. So that's high school. That's what I remember of high school in my family. Yeah. So then what? Then I went to college, and I was the first one in my family to go to college, which is a big thing to me because it's such a big thing right now. But anyway, Mom and Dad didn't know anything about college. They were very supportive. They took me on trip visits, including the one to Augustana, which is where I decided to go. And I had not yet applied. I just wanted to see it. And it was President's Day. It was really cold. And we went and we looked it all over. And some other man from McHenry was there with his son, who did not end up going to Augustana. But he told my dad that Augustana was rated third in the state academically. Now, I don't know where he got his information. I don't know if it's true, but my dad was gung-ho Augustana. So applied, went to Augustana, started there, and, it takes time to get used to college, but I did, and I had a good group of friends, and started, didn't start it, but I became president of the Smart Ass Club, which is a group of really English majors, but a few other kids, and we would get together Tuesday nights. We go to, usually we go to Hilltop Tap, which is the bar closest to campus. And what was cool then, which is really sad to me now that kids don't have this experience, is that professors would join us, and the president of the college would join us. And we would have these earth-moving discussions about faith and what was the difference between being a Lutheran and a Catholic. And sometimes we just hang out and drink. So college was fun. And then
Well, before you get too far down along, can I ask you, so who were you, what were you interested in as a teenager? Like, what were the things that you liked to do in your spare time? What were the music you listened to, Did you ride your bike? Did you jump off cliffs?
No, I didn't jump off any cliffs, unlike you. I had a bike. I rode my bike all over as a kid. We played things like war with sticks for guns with the neighborhood. It was a kind of situation where when your chores were done, you'd go outside. And you were expected to go outside. And then lunch, and then you go outside again until your mother called you in for dinner. And then sometimes you got outside again. And so, it was a pretty neighborhood thing. We played with the neighbors and all that. Then, I guess I back up a little bit. I've always been interested in writing, always. It's kind of ebbed and flowed in some of the years, but I we had to write paragraphs using our spelling words. And in 4th grade, I wrote a paragraph about a snowman. And that, I remember coming home from school with my paper that my sister Patricia, my teacher, had pretty much lined out in red ink, but I got a good grade on it. And I was so excited because I just loved it. I just loved the fact that you could look at words and figure out how to put them together just from a stupid spelling list. And so I told my mother, I said, I asked my mother, what is a person who writes called? I didn't think author at the time, and Mom kind of looked at me and she didn't know. And then she said, oh, a journalist. And I said, well, how do you become a journalist? Well, you have to go to school to be a journalist. Ding, right in my head. Right then, 10 years old, I knew I was going to go to college. I was going to get a degree in some kind of writing, which I did. And I was someday going to write. But then, with kids and work and whatever, the writing got put on hold, but I still found myself, if somebody needed something written, I wanted to write it. So, what's the other thing you asked?
Oh, just other things you're interested in, as a teenager, or other things you found.
Oh, music, yeah.
And music, whatever.
I like rock music. I've always liked rock music, and I like boy groups. And that's continued throughout my life. I love Christmas music, and I always have. And my dad used to buy these 99-cent vinyl albums of Christmas music. They were called Firestone. I think the company Firestone must have promoted them. And they had like megastars like Barbra Streisand and, I don't know, name one. Andy Williams is a big one. And my dad would bring those home, and if I could have listened to them all year, I would have. I love those. We didn't have... I didn't have a radio, per se, till I got maybe my junior year. I don't know. But we did have a radio at home, and we would come home from school and turn it on and listen to WCFL and WLS, which were pop music stations at the time. And so, I love that. I love listening to it. Sometimes, you hate that the same song comes over and over again on, popular music stations at that time. I don't know what they're like now. But, so that was a bit weird. One kind of fun thing was when I was a freshman in high school, there was a contest put out by Pine Brothers Cough Drops. And you had to fill out these cards, 3x5, that said Pine Brothers Cough Drops. And the deal was that the school who entered the most of those cards would get a free concert by Tommy James and the Shondells. Oh boy. Crystal Blue Persuasion. And we won. This little school in McHenry County won. And I remember Dad driving us up there for the concert. So it was just me. Maybe my friend Mary might have come with. But anyway, that's a great memory and a great musical memory for me. Other interests.
You talk about writing, journalism. When you went to Augustana, did that have any impact on your decision to go there personally? Or did you like the program? Did you like the people? Or is it you're just like, this is what I heard is good, this is what people are telling my parents is good, and going to Augustana?
I love the atmosphere of the school. I love that, everywhere we walked, people were saying, hi, welcome. Now, I don't know if they suggested that to the current students, because there were a bunch of kids that came on President's Day. But I just knew it was comfortable. It was small, and I wanted small. And the writing program, I don't think it was important to me then as the place I needed to feel comfortable in. But the very first class I took in writing, I remember I got a B- on a paper. I have it downstairs. And I was so excited. I remember I called my mom and said, Dr. Tweet gave me a B-. I thought, I am in the right place. And I was. And, years later when I got a job at Cal Lutheran, I loved the atmosphere at that place. And it was also a Lutheran institution, Lutheran educational institution. But there's just something about the atmosphere there that you feel comfortable, that I felt comfortable in. So.
Yeah, I cut you off earlier. It sounded like you might have been in college, you said. And then in college, something important happened in your life when you were in college.
Oh, yeah. Well, very important happened to me. So, my junior year, end of my junior year, I decided to stay in Rock Island. And I did not want to go home. And it was because every summer I worked 2 or 3 jobs to pay for college. My parents, they ended up paying $500 at the very end. But I didn't want to do that. And I thought, well, I could stay here in Rock Island and find 3 jobs here, which I did. And one day, as I'm walking over the bridge to my job as, I don't know what I was called. I don't know, just a girl who wore a short outfit with a white blouse, and it said Quad City Angels on the cover. And I was walking over the bridge, and I heard a horn honk, and it was my friend Joy. And I worked for Joy. She, Joy Barvetto, she was the director of student housing, women's student housing, that was it. And, I waved back. And then I came back the next morning, she said, this guy that was with me that, he's just a friend, and I took him with me to go, I don't even remember, sailing, boating, whatever. And he saw you and he wants to know, can he meet you? So I said, oh, sure, okay. And I was kind of over it. I was one of those girls that didn't date a lot and didn't have a lot of male interest. And I was so over it and so over being sad about it that I kind of went, okay, I don't care anymore. Sure, I'll meet him. And so she set it up. I think she set it up. She and a guy named Mike Shago. And Dave and I met at Lee's Bar, which no longer exists. And that was September 5th, 1976. Right? Yeah. And we've been together 44 years. But that was the best. I mean, getting your degree is important. Learning to deal with people and situations is important. But for me, that was the best part of ending college.
So, from my knowledge of your life, there was a possibility of, before you guys got married, there's a possibility of you continuing your education.
Yes.
What's this fork in the road story there?
Okay, so we went out. I started September 5th. Linda might have been a tad aggressive in trying to get to know David because he lived in a house that was on my way down campus. And I just stopped by a couple of times. But, I knew I liked this guy. And by Thanksgiving, he had met my parents and taken us out to dinner and told me he loved me. And so there we were, 2.5 months into our relationship, and we were committed to each other. And we knew we were going to get married. We didn't know when or anything like that. He asked me to marry him after a Christmas party that I think Union Federal held. And then and the reason he asked me, I think, was because I was talking about the future. Because, he hadn't asked me to marry him, and I needed to know what was I going to do. Was I going to teach? Was I going to try to find another job? Was I going to go to school? Well, there still is a writer's workshop in Iowa City, Iowa, which is like 3 hours from Rock Island. And I thought, okay, I'm going to apply to that. I'm going to get my master's degree in what was probably fine arts, but writing. Go to that workshop, and then there was other commitments as well. And that's when Dave asked me. He said, I don't like the idea of being apart. I don't like long-distance relationships. And then he asked me to marry him. But yeah, that was a fork in the road, definitely.
So I know he's sitting just off camera, but what did you like about Dad?
I love the fact that Dad was a person who called me by my first name. I mean, I had a few dates, but it was always like guys didn't react to you personally. And Dad would call me Kat or Linda, and it was like, whoa, right away I thought, wow, this guy, he's cool. And then the second date we had, we went to a wedding. And I didn't know it at the time. I learned later that as we walked into the church, his friends, and it's a very small town, his friends are all saying, Bo brought a girl, Bo brought a girl, you know. I didn't know that until later. And then that night they had a cake and punch reception right after the wedding. And then that night they had a barbecue out at the country club, and we went to it. And I met all his friends, and everybody liked Dave. Everybody. It was just amazing to me how, they come up to him, and they, shake his hand or say whatever, and it was like, wow, this guy is really liked. And then the final thing was, as we were walking out to the car to go back to his house, go back to Rock Island, there was a tall girl, really long blonde hair, and I remember she had a red dress on, and she was crying, just sobbing. And I was standing next to Dave's friend Mike, his first wife, and I said, well, what's the matter with that girl? Well, she thought she was going to be Mrs. David Boberg. And at the time I thought, okay, sorry, honey. I didn't think of myself as being Mrs. David Boberg, but that impressed me too, that, I remember thinking, I hope he didn't break her heart, and he didn't. But, she liked Dad too. And, then as time went on and we got to know each other better, he was just a great guy all the way around for me, and it worked.
So 76, my brother Dan's born in 80. What was your relationship like before kids? Like, what did you guys do for fun? This is obviously decades before the internet and streaming television. I mean, how'd you fill the hours?
Well, definitely not with television. Although we did have a little, when we first got married, Dave had a little orangey TV. I mean, it was this big, literally. And we would move it around the house to watch television. And we watched, I can't even remember the name of the show, but it was Barney and something. And we'd sit and laugh. Abe Vigoda was in it, which by the time my great-great-great-grandchildren hear this, Abe Vigoda's long gone. But so we would, watch TV a little bit. But we went to Chicago a lot. We liked Chicago. And we lived in Skokie when we were first married, Skokie, Illinois. And what did we do? We just did, trying to get used to our jobs. Dad had been there a couple months before we got married. He lived with my grandmother and grandfather, Catanzaro. He lived with them, and he drove into Wilmette every day for his job. He was training. And then we married in June, and then I had to find a job. So, that took a lot of time, and I think young people can relate to that. When you're right out of college, newly married, I think, it's like, boom, got to find a job. I had worked the year before as a teacher, and I didn't really like it, and there were no teaching jobs. So okay, now I'll get a publishing job. So I went to an agency, which was not a good experience, just because they weren't really giving me what I wanted. They were trying to give the companies what they wanted, maybe. And then I applied to Rand McNally, which was a publishing firm in Skokie, and got an interview and got a job as, they didn't call me admin, as the secretary to the woman who was the editor for children's books. And then I kind of moved around a little bit. And then I got pregnant with Dan, and I knew right away that I wanted to stay home with my children. And at that time you could do it, but it was tough. But so I quit that job, really, what I was doing there, and stayed home with Dan. So
I guess, how old were you when you started to have children, and what was it? I mean, obviously it's been decades, but what was it like? Do you remember making the switch to becoming a mother? A parent?
Let's see, I was 25 when Danny was born. He was born in December. I turned 26 in March. It was, it's not easy, I think. People think, oh, you have a baby, you get to stay home with your baby. Oh, that's great. It's difficult. And if you listen closely, like even I was listening to Elizabeth talk about being home with Marcus, it is hard. It's a hard adjustment to go from being, a person who only had to care about herself and maybe her husband for dinner to suddenly you've got this baby who's up all night and not reacting to me at all. That really freaked me out until finally one day he looked at me and he smiled in the middle of the night. But so that was hard. It was hard. And, what did you do? You took care of your baby, took care of your house. I belonged to a friend of mine belonged to a mother's group. It was her birthing class. And she invited me to go with her. And so I did that. And that was like I so looked forward to that. It was like once a month, just to get out, see other people, see other babies. We only had one car at that time, I think. So, I don't know, it was a little bit confusing. But, 44 years later, or 41 years, is he 41? Anyway, I did it. And it was easier with each baby, I have to say. Even with you as wild as you were, it was still easier to be a mom as I had children.
So who are your three children, and what were we like as newborns or toddlers?
Okay.
How are we different?
First child we had was named Daniel Adam. Dave named him the day we found out I was pregnant. He called me to tell me I was pregnant. He took the urine sample to the hospital, and I kept saying, Dave, I'm just sick, because I was throwing up. And he called me and he said, Catanzaro, be quiet. You're pregnant. And then he said, what do you think about the name Daniel? So Danny got named right away. Let's see. He was he didn't sleep. That was his biggest thing. Otherwise, he was a good baby. I mean, I never had any croupy babies. I never had any extremely fussy. I remember one time taking him out in a stroller with Dad, and this lady stopped us, and she said, I just want you to know that you very obviously have a wonderful family going, because this is the happiest baby I've seen in forever. I thought, oh, okay, good. Okay, so then you came along. We found out that I was pregnant with you on Dan's first birthday in Cambridge. And I wanted my children close together. I was used to being, close to my siblings, and I was hoping that was what was going to happen with you guys. And it did, sort of. But anyway, I remember Grandma Boberg saying, when we told her we were pregnant, saying, I won't believe it until the doctor says it's so. And I don't remember if I said this or not, but I felt like saying we hadn't had any tests when we told her we were pregnant with Danny. I had not seen a doctor when we told her we were Danny. Anyway, so you came along. Two things about Patrick. Well, a few things. So first of all, we were going to name Patrick Michael. And we, throughout the pregnancy, it was going to be Michael or Caitlin, because Dad didn't really like Megan, and I wasn't pushing it. You were one of the first babies that were ever ultrasound, and that was really grainy quality. And however, you were so active that they called the radiologist or whoever it was in to watch as they were rubbing the wand on my belly, because you were doing somersaults and you were sucking your thumb, which you did as a baby. So that was kind of cool. I only had that one ultrasound with you, but I had 3 with Megan. But anyway, so you were born. You were sick. You were immediately, I had you at like 3:30 in the afternoon, and I think it might have been like 8:30 at night that they brought you back into me to nurse, and you wouldn't nurse, and you were fussy, and you were kind of whimpering. And the nurse stayed in the room, which was really unusual, so I knew something was up. So then later on that night, the doctor came in and said, we have a serious situation with your baby, and we can't treat him here. So called Dave. He came right away. They had a hard time finding a NICU for you, and they ended up the resident at Swedish Covenant Hospital where you were born called in a favor at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's. He had a friend who was a resident there. She was the chief resident, and he was the chief resident at Swedish Covenant. So she came and got you, and she told us right away she thought it was beta strep, which was not a common, and I still think it's not common, but you got it. But she had to do a spinal tap, and and they were going to keep you in the NICU, and oh my God. So, I'm a mess there in the hospital, and Dad is driving back and forth between me and you, and, and his parents came down, Grandpa and Grandma Boberg came. Oh, it was horrible. But you responded well to the medicine they gave you, and at that time I don't know what they do now, but they stepped you back, so you went from the ICU to then a more less nurse coverage. Then you ended up finally in a normal nursery when we took you home, and I remember one of the doctors when you were in the NICU walked by, and I was holding you. It was probably the first time I held you since you'd gone there, and you were big. You were 8 pounds 9 ounces. And he walked by and he said, "Whoa, what's this toddler doing in here?" and that was a strength that you were as big as you were, because there were so many tiny, scrawny, thin little people, and most of them of color, because that was in a Chicago neighborhood. And anyway, so you came home like 3 weeks, I think it was 3 weeks later, and it was interesting to have 2 babies. Danny ignored you for the most part till you got older, and you were into everything. I mean, we had to put everything up, everything. Because you touched and crawled and climbed on everything and got into so much stuff that could fill a whole tape. Okay, so then Megan came along, Megan Kate, on October 18th, 1985. She, I would say, was our most planned baby. I knew I wanted a 3rd child. I really wanted a girl. And so I got pregnant with her, and 3 months into the pregnancy, got gestational diabetes, gained a ton of weight, and they were so awful, this office, because they wouldn't let me talk to the doctor. They wouldn't let me know the results until much later, and you'd had to go in for all these tests. And so I quit them, and I got a doctor. We were moving, and we got a doctor at closer to Arlington Heights, but she was fine. She was probably the quietest baby I had, and it was cool to have a little girl and all those really little clothes, but she was like, I could put her in the car seat and she'd start to cry, and I'd say, "Oh no, you can't cry," and she would stop. And sometimes I wonder about stuff like that. Was that a prelude to what was to come? But anyway, so those are my 3 children.
So besides children, because you had Megan when you were 30, right?
Yeah.
What would you say? There's anything in your 20s that you want to share that you remember that's not related to children?
To children. That's an interesting question. Anything in my life, my 20s? Probably not, because I so wanted to be a mother. I knew that when Roseanne was born. I remember saying to my mother, "I can't wait to have babies." And my mother's response was, "First you have to find a husband." So I was really baby motivated more than anything else. And, I did belong to some clubs, like in Arlington Heights. I belonged to the Arlington Heights Newcomers Club. Dad and I both did. And that was fun. And I wrote their newsletter. So the writing was going, even though it wasn't what it is now. Let's see, what else did I do then? Probably not a whole lot.
Yeah, that's fine.
Racquetball.
Oh, okay, yeah. But that was when the kids were older.
Not that
was I in my 20s? So at one point, we were still in Streamwood, and we were having a really hard time making ends meet. Really hard time. It was so bad that one day I drove up to my dad and I asked him if I could borrow $60. And he looked at me and he said, well, honey, why don't you ask for 100? But I knew my parents struggled and I didn't want to, I just needed $60. And he gave it to me. So then I got a job at a place called Publication Management, which I don't think exists anymore. But they were looking for someone to edit and write Racquetball and Review, which was a tabloid, and the other one was called National Racquetball Magazine. So I went back to work. I found this really nice older lady named Mrs. Muldoon who took care of you guys, and she took me in for peanuts. In fact, when I didn't ask her, what do you charge? She said to me, what can you afford? And she was a wonderful woman, and you guys did, I think, really well there. And it was close to work. So I went back to work and, wrote a bunch of articles that I still have downstairs for National Racquetball. And then Racquetball and Review was more just strictly facts and stuff. But I did get to go to a conference for that. So that was something different. And then the guy who owned Publication Management was horrible. And I quit. I just one day went in there and said, I'm not. He would hold meetings and he wouldn't let me come, and then he'd be mad at me that I didn't know what would happen in the meeting, or, he'd give out assignments, but he wouldn't tell me about the assignments, that kind of deal. And I thought, I'm done with this. I was pregnant with Megan, and I just said, I'm done. So I quit that job.
So the 30s then, that's 85, 95. In my life, that's quite a momentous 10-year stretch. But what do you what happened in your 30s?
We moved. That was a big thing. Well, I had Megan at 30. We had this nice little house in Arlington Heights that I loved, and I could live there my whole life, even though it needed some pretty drastic renovations. But Dad lost his job. The markets were terrible at the time. I remember he called me one day and he wanted me to go to the bank and take out all the money we had in savings, which I think was like $1,200. And anyway, he was scared. So he got a job in Des Moines, Iowa. And I remember leaving McHenry and crying so hard because I thought, it was an irrational thought, but I thought I was like never going to see my family again, because I was moving. Nobody moved then. Very few people at that time moved away from where their homes were. And here we were moving. And, so that we lived in Des Moines, 11 years? I think I was there 11 years with you guys. And then Dad moved to Chicago. That was a short-term thing.
Can I ask you about jumping ahead just a little
No,
bit?
that's
What
okay.
was it like when you moved to Des Moines? How different was it from Chicago and Illinois?
So Dad got the job, and we were called out, or I don't know if I asked or if they asked us to bring me to see Des Moines, because I'd never seen Des Moines. And I remember going to all these houses, because they were trying to show me what kind of houses were available, and meeting up with Dad's boss, and the guy who was eventually president of Wells Fargo, and I didn't want to move. And I remember for about the first 5 years I said, everybody would say, this is a great place to raise children. And it was a great place to raise children, but it was not a great place to be a young 30-year-old in, because there wasn't a lot to do. Court Avenue was just getting developed into what it is now today. And but I made a lot of friends with school, because Danny was in first grade when we moved here, and we got you into I think it was in Beaverdale, what do you call those schools? Preschool. And I met Susan Walker. And then she introduced me to some of her friends and blah, 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 blah. And it turned out that the neighborhood we bought in had a lot of people who were moving to Des Moines for jobs, for, So I had a good group of female friends. And then I really got into like a craft group, and we had a neighborhood craft group, and we would hold barbecues together, and the guys all got along, which was important, And sometimes I remember I would have people come over and sit in my family room and drink wine with me until 2 or 3 in the morning. So that part of Des Moines was good. And by the time we had to leave it, I was sad because I thought, I'd settled. So then we moved to Michigan. And I think it's you that said Michigan will always be just a blip in the road to us. Because, talk about a community that did not want anyone else, any other in them, and I'm hardly an other, but, I would try to join women's groups and make suggestions, and it was all, no, we don't do it that way, we do it this way, and blah, blah, blah. So I was not sad to leave Michigan. But then we went to New York, which was a fabulous experience because New York is so crazy, and the dad's job wasn't great there, but we would go into the city as often as we could, and you guys were old enough that we could do that. And let's see, Danny was in college. Were you in college in New York? Yeah, so it was just Megan at home, and she was fine, I think. Anyway, so that was that experience, but that job didn't last very long, and so then we moved to California in 2001?
We moved to California 2006.
No, New York, 2001.
Okay, New York, okay.
2002.
Okay, so
Yeah, start that.
I did not want to move to California. I just saw that as so far away. It wasn't, New York was far, but California just seemed like another world. But actually, California was probably the best opportunity for me, personally. And but that's what I remember in my 30s and maybe part of my 40s was moving, packing, or having people come and evaluate, or having to go out and look for a high school that offered broadcasting, or a school that had good English things, which was what Megan was so interested in. And I think we made the right choices for high schools wherever we went because it's benefited all of you guys. So yeah, that's what I remember in my 30s and 40s.
Do you remember any of your interests? Like when I think of my childhood, I think of you having like quilting and things like that. I mean, is there things that you remember that were important activities for you then that maybe you hadn't focused on before?
Well,
or things that you found joy through us doing, like
Dan's
wrestling or
Dan's wrestling was a big thing that was, and I did not.
band or,
I did not like sports. I loved band. I loved your marching band stuff. That was not an opportunity I ever had, and the people were cool. The kids were cool, and then we got to go to all those band meets, and the one that Danny went to that was in Scottsdale or Phoenix. And yeah, I love that. And I did like to quilt. I learned to quilt in Des Moines. I don't do it much anymore, but I've always liked fabric. That's always been in my life. And my grandmother Parker taught me to sew. And I've, it amazes me now that so very few people do sew. But, it's easier to buy what you want or get what you need than it was maybe back then. I don't know. And then whenever I could write anywhere, there was some PTA thing that I wrote once a month for when I started. I got very involved in PTA. Like, I wanted it to be a good experience. So, and it was. I mean, there were like 30 some women on that board. But we got so much done, and we built the playground at Westridge, and that took 2 years. That was over 2 years. And I was president 2 years in a row, just because they couldn't, the woman who was going to be president the second year bailed out, so they called me back, and I was glad to do it. And I saw a lot of things with you guys then, did a lot of things, participated in all those fun fair days and cake walks and, just fun stuff like that. And, I think that my kids brought me a ton of joy because Dad was so busy working, trying to keep, unfortunately, sorry, Dave. I think Dad was so scared that he was gonna lose another job and we were gonna be up the creek and all that I just turned all my worry into focusing on my kids and keeping my kids going and, what's the next event we have to go to. And my mother did not go to our events. Well, we lived so far from high school that we couldn't really participate in many things. I mean, I was editor of the student newspaper for a while there, but that was an activity that was held during the day. And, she never came to any plays that I was in that I remember or anything like that. So I love the model that Dave's mom and dad had, where they went to everything for their kids. They go to things that their neighbors' kids were doing. And I don't think I'm like that, but if my kid was going to be on a stage singing in a concert, I was going to be there. And I was.
Yeah, I mean, we can move on, but I kind of, from my childhood and Dan's and teenage years, even Megan's, I assume, I think about you in the PTA for 2 years and band boosters and organizing band trips and things like that. Obviously those are great events, the experiences I had, the Valley March Masters, but do you feel like you enjoyed them or was it kind of like...
Oh, I love them. But let me ask you, did you like having your mother so involved?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
sure. It was kind of fun to say, my mom organized this trip to Chicago.
Yeah, that was a big thing. And then being part of the co-chair of the Valley Fest was a big thing and learned a lot. I wish we'd had computers back then. It would have been so much easier, but,
Are there any of those events or things you organized, PTA, that you feel like were accomplishments or things that you had the most good, fun with or fondest memories?
The Valley Fest one is probably my proudest moment, if you want to put it that way, because we worked so hard on that. And at the last minute, Garmo did something, and I remember just having to suck it up, but it was a wonderful experience, and it went well. And at that time, we raised the most money ever for March Masters, isn't that what they were called? What was the other? You asked me something about.
Or there's just any of those that you feel like your fondest memory?
And PTA was a good experience. A lot of work, but good, and kept me involved and kept me. What I loved as I was doing it was that I was very connected to teachers, and so I was aware of what was going on with you guys as far as education. And I'm bold enough to say that I requested teachers for you every single year because I knew you weren't ADHD. But I can't tell you how many teachers disagreed with me. But I did not want to put you on medication because I felt like he's a little boy, he's squirmy, he has to be disciplined sometime, and some teachers just knew how to do it, And I can't remember, Woodward, was that your third grade teacher? She had this star system on your desk.
Cubes.
Yeah. And I thought, and then she told me one day, she said, I took away his chair because he can't sit in a chair. And I said, fine, Patrick, if you can't sit in a chair, that's fine, but you have to stand at your desk. And then Judy Zobel was still my really good friend. She just recently gave me back, after she heard what you guys were now doing, well, that makes sense because this is how he was as a kid. And I thought, that's so cool. And it's, to have developed that good friendship with her was really great. And then, I was also, I don't remember what it's called anymore, but it was the district-wide meeting of all the school PTA presidents and the superintendent and some of the administrators. And I did that for a year, and that was hard work, but I was proud of that too. I like to think that I'm pretty proud of most of my accomplishments as a person. I don't look back and say, I wish I would have done this, because I did it. So, that's how that goes.
One thing you haven't mentioned that I know is a big part of your life and my sister's was horseback riding. Do you remember when that became a thing for our family, horseback riding? And how did it progress? How was it part of your life?
Well, a friend of mine took her daughter down for a lesson. And I think the first lesson might have been free. I don't remember anymore.
That's how they get you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, it is. It's a slippery slope. That's what Dad calls it. It's so true. And so I took Megan, and Megan loved it. And I thought, well, okay. So she someone was like, why don't you come a few more lessons, blah, blah. Oh, okay. How about you lease a horse? Because, she can really ride. Oh, okay. And, then we ended up buying 3 horses. Yeah, 3 horses. And, but it was a good thing in a lot of ways for Meg, because she really liked it. She had some talent, but neither one of us were stupid enough to think that this was Olympian material, which some moms do think that of their kids. It was discipline, which I think speaks a lot to the way she is so disciplined in her work today. And is mother-daughter bonding. There were fights at shows between us, and there were great moments, and so I'm glad we did it. But it went from, she quit riding when we were in California, but she rode in college even, and I went to a show in college, so she did a lot, and she probably would still be riding if she could afford a horse. But I think your dad and I are both very glad that we're done with that, because it was super expensive. And, when I compare buying a guitar for you to buying a horse for your sister, I'm afraid there's no justification for that, except that my belief is you're feeding the child's interest. So
when you guys moved to California, so you would have been about 51, I believe, 2006. So
I guess.
Megan's in school. I live in Chicago. Dan is about to graduate college in New York. What was it like going from a parent of 3 and all those activities, and now you and Dad, for a brief moment out in California, are out there by yourself,
A semester, empty
Well,
nest.
you never had all 3 of us except for holidays in the house at the same time.
Well, but then, we had Dan and Megan living with us for a while. I mean, they both moved out at different times, but moved back in. I don't know. I love being alone with your dad. I do. And, especially now that we're retired and we're here, it's nice to have those days when it's just us. But I did not mind Danny living at home as long as he did, because he wasn't in the way, other than he was a slob. Sorry, Dan. But, and Megan needed us. She actually moved out, and she probably shouldn't, but sorry, Meg. But, it just was what it was. But at the same time, I remember in New York, maybe possibly before, you graduated first, right? Didn't you? Yeah. So it was before you graduated, and I got a job at the Hillel Center at University of New York at Stony Brook, because I needed to find a way back into the work world, and I was kind of like, what am I going to do? I don't know what I want to do. I didn't even think about writing. So while I was there, I met a young woman who had gotten her master's degree in student life or student development, one of those things, and I really liked what she did, and I liked being with college kids. And there's one group that was a world religions class, and they would all head back to the Hillel Center because we had a big open area for just to hang out. But my desk was right there, and they would sit and talk to me about their world religions. There was a Protestant, a Jew, a Wiccan, a Catholic, and there was one other faith. I'm not thinking, maybe Buddhism. And so we would have these fabulous discussions, and all the time I'm thinking, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. So when we moved to New York, or not to New York, to California, I had to give that job up. And Dad found, I think he was looking at the internet, a job at Cal Lutheran that was with their campus ministry, and it kind of mirrored what I did in New York. And so I went there, got that job. They were thrilled to get me, and they were a lovely couple to work for. And that Cal Lutheran offered the Masters of Education in student counseling. I'm not saying that right. But anyway, college student personnel, that's what they called it. And so I thought, oh, this I would like to do. So, I'm 52 or 3 or whatever years old I was. Go back to college. A little scared because it's like, oh, God, I'm going to be with all these brilliant young kids. But I loved it. I loved being in that class with those kids. And so I got that degree and that interest. And there was one class I took that I always think about. I can't remember exactly what the class was called, but it was about working and about lifespan kind of things with your job. And we had to do this chart, which, your first job and then your next job and then your next job, and how it impacted your whole professional life. And I think about that, and I think about, I've always been a teacher. I've always been a writer. I've always been a counselor of some kind, or a nurturer. And it was great. I didn't like that class, but I liked that particular part of the class because it brought to mind, that what we do in life is, affects us throughout it.
So when you moved to California, you mentioned that you didn't want to go there. You were more than hesitant, how did California suit you when you were out there?
Well, so we go out there to look it all over. They flew me out, and it was like a red-eye flight because I remember getting into Dad's. They didn't have an apartment for him. He was in a hotel, and so I didn't see what I was driving through. But the next morning, we got up and walked out of the hotel room, and I looked around and I went, oh, okay, I could live in this. Because my idea of LA was what, downtown LA looks like, which is in Hollywood. Ugh. But, so, we went there. Dad's got a good job at the top mortgage company at the time. I'm settling in. We took a while to find the house we found. It was my favorite house.
All right, Mom. So you were saying they flew you out. You woke up. Bam.
Yeah, it's like, okay, there are rolling hills here. There's trees. The beautiful mountains. I miss that about California. Mountain climbing and all that. And I thought, okay, Linda, Dave's got this opportunity. You need to suck it up and find your own opportunity. And that's the word Dad used when he first told me about moving to California. And I was like, I don't want to move to California. And he's like, I look on this as an opportunity. And it was a big opportunity all the way around. So we moved out there.
What was it? Well, tell me about your experience in California. I mean, it's not Illinois. It's not New York.
It's different. You learn very quickly who's fake. There's a lot of fakery in people in LA because they all want to be, or not all of them, but a lot of them want to be people, celebrities. And there's a lot of focus on celebrity in California that goes beyond norm. Like when Michael Jackson died, man, that went on forever on television and news, and everything was Michael Jackson died, Michael Jackson died. It's like, is there anything else going on in the world? So that part took a little getting used to. But, I loved my work, and I loved, for the most part, and I loved my initial work. I loved my next job. I liked the job, but the person I worked for was difficult. But, so, good and bad. Bad probably being that I developed cancer, while I was there. That was a blow. Still is a blow. But, I had a really good first oncologist. Really good. I really liked her, and she was tough, and she was aggressive, and I needed that. I needed somebody who was going to go to bat for me, because she would say, your cancer is ugly, which means it's bad. But she did everything she could to battle it, and if I had to go through it again, I would look for Dr. Myring, because she was just helpful. But then, it's like, well, okay, so that happens.
Do you remember, sorry to interrupt.
No.
When was this? And do you remember what happened, like the day you found out?
So I went for a mammogram in August of 2013. Yeah. And I was really, I really made sure that I met all those appointments. And every time I went for an appointment, even when I lived in Des Moines, it's the first one I ever had, they would stop me, they would take pictures, they'd develop them, however they develop them, and then they'd say, we need another one on the right side of Mrs. Boberg. And it's like, oh, God. And that went on through Des Moines, Michigan, New York. And so when I got to California, I'm doing these mammograms, and they're going okay. And then one day, the radiologist, was it the radiologist? I think it was. He said, we need you to come back for another mammogram and an MRI, or not MRI, ultrasound of your breasts. And so they do this, and as the ultrasound technician is doing her thing, she says, I don't see anything but normal tissue here. And I'm like, thank God, thank God, thank God. And then she said, give me a minute. And she went back to talk to the radiologist, and I don't know what he told her, but she came in, she was more forceful, and she said, okay, now the radiologist wants to see you, which that's pretty unusual. So I go back there, and they have two screens, and they have a screen of my right breast in 2012 and a screen of my right breast in 2013. And this one is dull, and if you've ever seen a picture of a mammogram, it's just like gray stuff. But this one was colorful, like fireworks going off. And so I didn't learn until later that lobular breast cancer, which is what I have, which is the rare kind, it's like a spider web in your breast. And so he did that, and my internist called and said, okay, we want you to see Dr. Brooks. Okay, so I go see Dr. Brooks thinking she's an oncologist, but she wasn't. She was a breast surgeon oncologist. So she didn't treat people. She just opened them up and took out what she could. And in my case, it was lumpectomy. So she did the lumpectomy. And I remember I told Dad, I said, I know I have breast cancer. I know I do. And the doctor's nurse called and said, Dr. Brooks wonders if you could come in as soon as possible tonight, because she's going on vacation. So that's, I think, when I said to Dad, I know I have breast cancer. So I went in there, and she was a very sweet Vietnamese woman. And she told me, she said, I'm sorry, I have to tell you that you have breast cancer. And, you're so stunned and you don't really know what's going to happen. And I always say, journeying through this cancer thing is like earning a PhD in cancer, because you have to be diligent about keeping up with what medicines are and what treatments are and trials and all the things that the doctors forget to tell you. And so then I was referred to, or she gave me a list of oncologists, and I said, I thought you were the oncologist. She said, no, I am a breast surgeon oncologist. And that's how I got hooked up with Dr. Myring.
So now you've got, hindsight. Was the experience a classic breast cancer experience, like what most people have?
No.
Or, what sticks out from that looking back now?
Well, I guess the treatment was classic in the beginning. And then, we didn't know that I had this tumor in my head. And so when I say no, it wasn't classic, it's because I didn't recover the way that most women recover from initial breast cancer treatment. And I didn't know how to scream loud enough. I mean, I'd go in for my checkups and they would say, "How are you doing?" And I'd say, "I'm so exhausted. I can barely do my work. Things aren't, oh, it's chemo brain." And I'm like, "Oh, great. How long does this last?" "Oh, maybe a year." But then when it got past a year and I went in and the nurse said to me, "Oh, some people it takes 3 or 4 years." I thought, this is not right. 3 or 4 years feeling like this? Now I could probably say, "Oh, you're lucky you felt that way." But anyway, and I was screwing up at work, like major league screw up. Like I remember coming home one day and telling Dad, I would have fired myself that day. That's how bad I was. And I was yelling at students, which I never did. And so all the stuff that's associated with having something in your head was happening to me, and I didn't know it. So finally, the head boss of Student Life said, "Linda needs to take medical leave." No questions about it. This was what I had to do or quit. So I had to go to the doctor to get the paperwork filled out for medical leave. And she said to me, "How long do you want to take off?" And I said, "A year." She goes, "A year?" And I said, "I'm exhausted." I said, "My husband tells me I hit the snooze alarm button 8 times. And, one time I had 5 minutes to get to work." And so she said, "Okay, we're going to do an MRI." All right, so they do this MRI. Well, first, let's see. First, Grandma had her 90th birthday, and we visited at the Winds. And then I went and saw my sisters. Is that how it worked? Yeah. And I came back, and they were supposed to, the neurologist I had seen was supposed to schedule an MRI, and he didn't. And I called up and I said, "What's happening with this MRI?" "Oh my God, we forgot to schedule it." So they scheduled it for like the next day. And I go to that thinking, okay, one more test, one more time, let's do this. And I had this very cheery nurse take me in, take off your clothes, lay on the bed. At that time, they did not have earplugs. The office was really shabby. But then she came back in and she said, Dr. Rubenstein said that he would like to use nuclear medicine to light up. It lights up things that are not supposed to be in your body. And I said, "Yeah, but Dr. Wong didn't order that." It was my neurologist. And she said, "Well, it's up to you." But she said, "He really thinks you should have this done." And she was crying. And I remember thinking, I've never seen a nurse cry. Was he being mean to her or what? So I said, "Okay, I'm here. Let's just do it." So I get done, I get dressed, I go out to the waiting room because they said they wanted me to wait to get the disc, which I still have, which I've never looked at. And Dr. Rubenstein came out and he says, "Well, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is the tumor is not in your brain. But the bad news is it's there, and it's like 6 centimeters or whatever. It was huge. And we want you to go to Simi Valley Hospital right away." And, again, you're just stunned. And I'm like, "I'm going to go home first. I want to get my husband." He said, "You need to go to the hospital right away." And I walked out of there and I thought, I'm going home. I'm going to get Dave. I'm going to have somebody with me. So I did. So I went home, got Dave, and they took it out. And but soon after they took it out, it was like all of my cognitive abilities increased, like exponentially every day. And I call it a reboot. I've actually got a Snapfish book about it. So that wasn't fun.
Obviously, cancer has been a longer part of your life now, but do you remember that being scarier, the same type of scare, or, someone cutting open your brain?
No, but see, I didn't. Dad will even tell you. I was like, even though I was stunned, I was like, "Oh, okay, just take care of it." a normal person would say, oh my God, they're going to cut open my head. Not me. I was like, okay, let's just do this. But then later, when they wanted to do Gamma Knife, because they didn't get all the tumor out, they couldn't, it was too close to the pons, the center between the lobes. So I had to do this Gamma Knife, and I'm freaking out about Gamma Knife. And I remember Megan saying to me, Mom, you just had your brain cut open. This is nothing. This is nothing compared to having your brain cut open. But I was like freaking out because now my cognitive abilities were back. I knew this was serious stuff. But they got it all and it was fine. And the Gamma Knife procedure was much easier than the damn meningioma surgery. But, yeah.
So that was 2015?
Yep.
So there's 5 years left in California then, or just under 5 years.
Yeah.
What was the remainder of your time there? I mean, your work changed a bit. You got a new boss.
Yeah.
I mean, you eventually retired.
Yeah.
What was those last 4.5 years in California like for you?
Difficult. Maybe not difficult isn't the right word. There were some beautiful things that happened, like, climbing up a mountain with Dad, every weekend. And I would get so excited about it. Or we'd walk up to the Ronald Reagan Library, which, if you remember, is this really steep road. And I'd get up there and I'd like throw my arms up in the air like I did it, So that was cool. Working with Megan on the garden so much was really, it was good in a lot of ways for her, for me. I I used to love to pull weeds because I just, it just relaxed me. Anyway, so that part was good, but work was difficult because they didn't understand. And I don't think a lot of people understand that breast cancer is not the same for two women. It's different. And mine being aggressive and then having the meningioma and my stupid boss thinking that she was going to help me by bringing flowers to the hospital. And then the next day when I called her and said, no, I'm home now, don't come see me. I'm not there. And she was really quiet. And I said, what's going on? And she said, I feel so much guilt. And I didn't argue with her because she should have felt a lot of guilt because she was really riding me hard. Why aren't you getting better? Why, Ela, some woman that she knew, she had the same thing you had and she's fine now. She's back to her normal self. And I was not. And there was no compassion there. It was just, and I kind of think a lot of people feel that way because they don't understand what it is to have cancer and what it does to your body and what, it's the effects years later. So, yeah, so that was difficult. Another good thing was I lost a lot of weight. Let's see. And then, I'm still trying to keep up with things. 2017 was probably my best year as assistant director because I had a fabulous World Fair and I had a fabulous International Ed Week. And did some things that I really wanted to do that Juanita let me do, I think, out of guilt. And so that was a really good year. I remember World Fair, Dad came to it, and I was just like, it was outside, it was beautiful California weather. There were so many kids at it. We'd had the taiko drummers, the Japanese taiko drummers. That was my best year. But then the powers that be decided that they wanted to change things, and that's her, they can do that, right? And they hired this woman who had absolutely no compassion. I have never met anybody like her. And she didn't get that I couldn't go to doctors at 7 o'clock at night. I remember saying that, well, why can't you make an appointment at 7 o'clock at night? What doctor sees people other than Doc in the Box, and I can't very well go to them. And then why did I need to take time off? And it was bad. So, and then the cancer came back. That was April 2019. And I think I started with, I don't remember what, intermittent leave, a second intermittent leave. So you could take days off, and when they accumulated so much. But then I switched it over to family medical leave because I was tired, I wasn't feeling good, and I was tired of working for her. And the day that I the day after, I took family medical leave. I had an appointment with the Social Security office to get to see if I could apply for disability. And as I'm in there, the woman's, we had to do it face to face. And the woman's like, so what is your diagnosis? And I said, stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And she's typing it in, and the computer like buzzed or beeped. And she looked at it, and her eyes popped open, and she said, oh, and you have been, what do they call that? When you're straight lined, is that the word?
Streamlined?
Streamlined into looking this over. So Dad had to fill out paperwork as my caregiver. My doctors had to fill out paperwork. The therapist that I'm still seeing had to fill out paperwork. I had to fill out paperwork. It was like this deep. And I remember taking it, copying it, and then mailing it to whatever address in San Diego and thinking, I am never going to get this. And then I got it. They I think I had to call. They didn't. I said, I've been waiting. It's been 7 weeks or whatever. And the guy said, well, I'll tell you. He says, you have disability. So which means you can't work anymore. So it was Christmas time, and Danny came home first. Where was Danny at that time? Here, yeah. And he flew home first, and I picked him up at the airport, and we went to Stacked, which was in the mall, Thousand Oaks Mall. And as we're sitting there, in walk all of my department. They were having a goodbye for the young woman who worked for us for a long time. And Christina, the bad boss, came over, put her arm around my shoulder and said, we'll see you next week. And I thought, no, you won't. And so I had to wait because of insurance. I didn't want to quit until we were supposed to report back to work on January 6th, which was when Christmas vacation ended and my leave ended. And so the morning of January 6th, I wrote her an email and said, I can't work anymore. I got disability, and you cannot work. If they find out you work, they take your disability away. So that's how my job ended. I did have to go back for a retirement party, which I still think was kind of yucky. I threw the gifts out in the garbage as I walked out of the building because they were awful. But anyway, that's how that ended. And, occasionally I wonder what's going on there. And I do have a few friends on Facebook that I read. Some of the stuff I read is about Cal Lutheran. But I don't miss it. I don't miss it at all.
What would you say are the most positive experiences from your time at Cal Lutheran? Was it your master's, or was it the 2017 year? Was it those events, the kids? What do you think of the things that were your favorite parts?
My favorite parts were the students. I love those students, and taught me so much about culture and differences and attitudes people have toward the other. And so I love that. I love my peer mentor group. I got to put that together every year but 1 year, and the 1 year that Juanita filled it in for me was the worst year. So, but I love those group of kids because I got to pick them out, and I got to work with them. And that also was the best group. That 2017 group was the best group of peer advisors I had. My master's, that was an accomplishment. That, when Dad asked me to marry him because I was going to go to Iowa City, and I didn't, I just figured, okay, put that on hold. Then maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. And then it did. So, that was cool. I loved my time in campus ministry. Melissa and Scott are wonderful people. And Melissa came over to our house after I got out of Timmy surgery, and I wish I'd had a tape recorder for the prayer she said. It was so beautiful, and I don't remember it because she said it, and but I'm listening to them like, wow. So they were really good people. What else? I don't know. I think that's pretty good for a job, right? To have those kind of memories, and some parts really difficult, really awful. And, sometimes I think, why did I let myself work there so long? But it was because I loved my job. I loved what I did, and I loved how close it was to our house. So, anyway.
So, you retire, but I don't even know. I think it was well before that you got back into writing as more than a hobby, like an interest, like a mainline interest.
It is.
When did you start writing, your stories and your books?
In 2016, I went to a conference, a NAFSA conference, and then went to Mary Kay's house for a visit. And she had to work one day, so I was all alone in that back bedroom, and it just came to me. It's just like Donovan, Lynn, and then I knew the story was probably going to parallel a lot of what had already happened. In some ways, I think some of my writing is like a release. Like, I'm telling what happened. And the book I'm working on, I just sent to the proofreader, has a whole section about Mary Kay's death. And it was very therapeutic for me to write that stuff. But that's when it started. And then I was up a lot. If you remember, I wasn't sleeping. Or I'd wake up really early in the morning, which I never did otherwise, but I think that was a result of medication. And so I would get up and turn on my computer, make coffee, and I usually had 2 or 3 hours by myself to do that. And then it just kind of, went into things. I remember I was afraid to tell Dad because I knew it was going to be expensive. But he's very supportive of it, and it really is fun. Sometimes it's frustrating, but for the most part, it's fun. The technology part is just, but yeah.
So, 2016, it's been 6 years. I mean, how big of a part of your life? How much have you written? I mean, this is like, did you lose interest? No.
I have 10 books written. Now, of those published, I think I have 5. But 3 of them are coming out. One of them is coming out in a couple weeks, another one in 2 months, and then one of them in the fall. And it's a completely different series than I've been working on. It's nothing to do with breast cancer. But it was fun, and it's set in Des Moines. So I'm excited about that. And then I have 2 or 3 other things that I started. One is about an international student advisor, and the other one is about angels. That one I think I might do just on my website. And there's another one about, that I just wrote because I saw a plot hole in a Twilight book, and I thought, I can fill this hole, but I'm never going to publish that. But it was fun to write, and I like to read it every once in a while, and I sometimes think maybe I should turn it into fan fiction. But I don't know. But yeah, it's a big part of my life. The unfortunate part is that, a couple things. One is not unfortunate, and that is interruptions from family. If my family need me, or if I feel like I want to be at something with family, then I'm going to do it, and that interrupts the writing. But, so be it. But the other part is that when I don't feel well, or I have a bad week, it is hard to write. It is just hard physically to write. And like Dad being sick this week, we brought my computer out here, and it's not ideal, but it has to be the way it has to be. So, I told the nurse practitioner the other day, I'm writing a book called Figuring It Out. And she said, "Oh, are you a writer?" I said, "Yes, I am." She says, "I love it when people tell me about their jobs." She says, "So what's figuring it out about?" I said, "Figuring out how to get through all this cancer stuff." And, I've got pages and pages and pages, and some of it might be just pure rant. I haven't reread it in a while, but I already know which editor I'm going to send it to. So it's an ongoing interest, and it's if I had to have Timmy to get to this place where, they had to remove something to make me more cognitively aware, then I guess I'm glad that happened, even though it was a horrible thing to have happen. If I had to have cancer, nobody wants cancer. I would never redo cancer. But it it created an opportunity for me to talk about that. And there's one book on mental illness the second book is about mental illness, and there's another one of those on the way too. So I guess that's, the beauty of it is, You have to struggle, but sometimes you end up with great elation.
So you retired then just before your 65th birthday. You got disability. 65th birthday?
Right before the 65th birthday.
Yeah.
Because I was only on disability a short time.
Yeah. So what happened early 2020? Where did your life take you?
2020. Okay, so...
Here.
I know it took me here. I have to think back the years. I'm
Yeah.
not good at that. So, because I keep thinking we moved here in 2019, but we actually moved here in 2020. So, yeah. So, I retired, and then Dad and I both knew that we wanted to move to Iowa to be with you guys, you and Dan. Megan wasn't. She was still living at home at that time. No, she had an apartment at that time. So we came out here, decided we put our house up for sale, cleaned the hell out of it, had this amazing guy come and take pictures that I wish I had copies of. And we came out here for the weekend, and we were like determined to buy a house because we knew we didn't want to come back and forth a lot, and thank God we didn't do that. And so Dan went with us the first day house hunting, and we thought we found a house in development in Grimes. And I remember Dan was shocked, you were shocked, because typically it took us a while to ever find a house, but we knew we wanted ranch, we knew we wanted the neighborhood, and the Grimes neighborhood was not good. But that one fell through, and I think we went to see Grandma, and then we came back here. And Dad had done enough research to know that this house was available and there were as a townhouse. And we had Mary Kay Michelson ready to go, our realtor. But anyway, so we drove into this neighborhood in Green Meadows. And as we're coming around that slight curve toward this house from whatever direction that is, that must be.
It's coming north.
Yeah, north. I said, this is the neighborhood I want to live in, because it was so full of trees. It was cold. It was February, but you could tell that it was going to be a great neighborhood. And then Mary Kay wasn't available, but she sent a guy out here to meet us. So we went to dinner, came back here, and then you came too, right? Even your kids and wife. And I didn't even have to say anything. Dad said to the guy who was showing us around, he said, so can I make an offer for you, or do I have to wait for Mary Kay? And I think we went back to your house. No?
No, I mean, this is your interview, but the story is that we're here. We show up. You've been here for 2 minutes. Dad went to the basement and came upstairs. I've been in the house maybe a minute, and I swear to God, Dad comes upstairs and he's like, so can we put in an offer?
Yeah, right.
I was like, is this Dave Boberg?
I know. Oh, your brother was the same way. So we put in that offer and through Mary Kay, and Mary Kay gave the people who own this house like an hour to decide. And they came back and said yes. And then the next day we came back here because Mary Kay was able to meet us and schedule a inspector. And the lady who had listed the house is a neighbor. I've not talked to her since then, but she was clearing the driveway, I remember, when we showed up, and she said that she'd had another call with an offer that morning. So it's like, I guess we were smart in doing it as quickly as we did. And then the beautiful thing about it was before we left Des Moines, we were in the airport, we got notification that we had an offer on our house in California. We actually had a couple offers, and it's different there, but ultimately they were bidding against each other, but it got to the point where we knew they weren't going to go any higher than they were at. And we said, well, how do you make a judgment on which buyer to get? And the guy, the realtor we had a reason for why we ended up picking the people who bought our house. But so that was beautiful, because my experience with selling homes, all those times we had homes, was never pleasant. Maybe one time. But this was breeze compared to that, and all electronically, which, as much as I hate technology, that is the beauty of it. You can do it all online. You don't have to sit face to face. You don't have to meet up. I think the final thing we had to do was sign a bunch of paperwork and get it notarized, and our realtor in California did all that. So it was a breeze. So yeah, that's what happened in 2020.
So how has Iowa been treating you the second go around?
Des Moines is comfortable. It is a cushy place to live from my perspective because it's cheaper than a lot of places. People are laid back. People are friendly. And I remember they were friendly last time, but this time around it's like I don't meet a person anywhere I go who doesn't want to talk to me. And I'm an extrovert, so that's cool. But the disappointment has been that, well, first the COVID thing and being so locked in, that was horrible. And then the friends that have disappeared that knew we were coming back. I was so excited to get together with them again, and it hasn't happened. So, but that could just be they have replaced my friendship with somebody else, and, I can deal.
One thing, though, is you have all three of your grown children here,
Yes.
plus grandchildren. I mean, obviously, you spent night and day with us when we were kids, and you were a stay-at-home mom raising us. What's it like living, a stone throw from us and Meg and Dan just up the road a little bit? You're back here where we grew up. Is it?
It's wonderful.
Is it interesting?
It's wonderful, and it's time depleting. And let's see, for a while there, weekends were crazy. It's like, okay, we're gonna, Megan wants to go out and do things. She and I have this thing where even in California where we would go out on the weekends and go to stores, or mostly flower stores, and get our nails done. And so, that is an important part of her life with me still. So, she didn't come out until, I don't remember.
September 2020.
Yeah, but she realized very quickly that she did not want to be alone in an apartment in COVID with nobody and no family and no bubble. And I think the only beauty about COVID has been that we created a bubble so that, for a while there we were able to interact with each other until, Eliana was born, and then we had to be very careful with Eliana. But even now, you have to be careful, but we have a bubble. We respect that Dad was sick and we had to wait 10 days, but now you've invited us to dinner. It's a bubble. We know we are safe with each other, right? So, but back to the time thing. So there are weekends where it feels like, okay, this one for breakfast, this one for lunch, this one for dinner. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. But we wouldn't give it up. I mean, Dad and I had talked about that, Last weekend we had nothing because he was sick. And, it's fine in its own way. You get stuff done. If you don't feel well, you don't have to worry about how people look at you or whatever. But we really prefer hanging out with the kids. And we love it when you ask us to help out with the girls. Sometimes it doesn't work time-wise, but it's, most of the time it does. And I think the weird thing to me is that we moved so much when you were young, and you did not have the interaction with the grandparents, your grandparents. And I didn't even think about that as a negative, But now that I am a grandma and I am close to my grandchildren, again, going back to Dave's mom's, way she does things, I like that. I like being there for the kids. I'm a little concerned that I won't be here long enough for some reasons, but, it's cool. And it's also very cool to watch your kids in their relationships with their spouses or their significant others. And, I'm thrilled and I'm anxious to see what happens with Danny and Sydney and Megan and her new interest, if anything happens. But it makes me happy just to see that, because you want your kids to be happy. And for a while there, I didn't know if Megan would ever be happy. Sorry, Meg. And even Danny, he was in a rut at home in California, and nothing is happening. And I don't think he even had any dates. Maybe he did. Did you, Dan? But now things are going well. That's a pleasing part of my life.
So, I mean, we've kind of gotten all the way through the timeline here.
We did it.
Yeah, but I mean, I just feel like we could go back things maybe we didn't touch on.
Yeah.
So, you kind of glossed over your wedding. What was June 10th, 1978? I mean, it's June 11th, 2022 right now.
Yeah.
So
44 years ago.
What was your wedding like?
Beautiful.
Where was it, and what was it like?
Okay, so it was in McHenry, Illinois, at St. Patrick's Catholic Church, which is the church that I went to school at. And it was a beautiful day, like the perfect weather day. And so we went to church. Dad had forgotten his shoes. He thought he left his shoes in the car, because we packed our car to go on our honeymoon, which was in Montreal. But we packed it and left it in my parents' driveway because, we didn't want anybody to mess with it. I mean, I don't know if the guys still do that now, but that used to be a thing where they throw dead fish in your car or whatever. So we didn't want that. So Dad thought he'd left his good shoes in the car, and he did. And we finally got him to him. But so it was a beautiful day. I remember driving to church with Mom and Dad, and my mother said something about, look at this day, it's a gorgeous day. And I said, it's a good omen. And it was. So we got married at St. Pat's. The basement of the church was where brides went before the Mass started. And it was decorated in Disney stuff. And it was because they were having some kind of social event that had to do with Disney as the theme. And so that was kind of fun because there's all these characters, and the photographer was following us everywhere we went from about, 10:30 in the morning until, the rest of the day. So he was there. And then my grandfather, Catanzaro, God love him, I could hear him coming down the stairs to the basement, and he said he had to go to the bathroom. He wanted to see me. And so when he got there, he, kissed all my sisters, but when he got to me, he put his hands on my face like this and said, you look beautiful, honey. That's a lovely memory. And then going up the stairs, finally, it's noon, the bells are ringing, and I hadn't planned on that. I love church bells. I love campanellas and all that stuff. And so the bells are ringing, and Jeannie said, they never ring these bells. And I said, well, another omen. So then I walked down the aisle, Dad's at the end, and I remember put my hand on his arm, and it was like a solid board. And I was nervous walking down that aisle, so I can imagine how Dad felt, So, let's see. So we're married. We get our pictures taken on the altar, and the priest comes running up and says, you have to be out of here in 10 minutes. We have a funeral. And the funeral cortege, the group, all the cars that were following the casket were waiting at the end of the block for us to get out of the church. And my grandmother, Catanzaro, said to me, it is bad luck for a bride to be in a church when there's a funeral. It's like, oh, okay, let's get out of here. So then we had forgotten about the tradition of decorating a car, that drives you to your reception. Did you guys have that?
We had a stretch limo.
Oh, you had a limo. Okay. Well, nobody did limos in 1978. So some of the guys ran out and got some stuff and decorated Jim McCoon, he was Dave's best man, his car. And then we're driving to Crystal Lake where John Evans Inn was, which was where the reception was. And it was like bad traffic, like horrible traffic to get there, but we did it. And then the reception, we were talking about this just yesterday. So were you here? Maybe Megan and Dad and I were talking about it, but we got a bottle of the wine that was served at our wedding. I don't even remember the name of it anymore. But the guy who owned John Evans, whose name might have been John Evans, he gave us 3 bottles. And Dave's fraternity brothers stole that wine. And they went and had a party afterwards, after our wedding. So they had a great party because they got 3 bottles of wine, which were probably done in 2 minutes. So, yeah, it was a nice day. It was a beautiful day.
So, I guess the last couple questions then. So, your Catanzaro family, if you could think of a day or a trip or an event, if you could relive one day, just, your current consciousness, zap back to 16-year-old, 18-year-old Linda, do you know what day you might choose?
It's 4th of July at Grandpa and Grandma Catanzaro's house. And I don't know how old I was, but it's like something I should write. My dad got up really early, and the rule was if you wanted to go out with Dad early in the morning, you had to get yourself up. So I got up. We went into McHenry to an ice block house, which don't exist anymore. And we got, I don't know how many blocks of ice. And we went to the Catanzaros, who lived in Mundelein. And there were a bunch of old ladies around the table, old. And Grandma always gave me coffee, this much coffee, that much milk, and sugar, because I still drink coffee that way. And she always had baked goods. And these ladies were talking in Italian, and even then I was fascinated by that because I didn't understand it, but it was just like they're talking in another language. So that was a cool day, and then a cool moment. And then Grandpa always cooked out on the grill, and his sister, who would be your great-great Aunt Virginia, brought homemade Italian sausage that was out of this world. I've never tasted, I still remember, I can taste it right now. So that was going on, and then the men would play games out in the yard, and women sat in the house and talked. And for some reason, my great uncle Sam, great uncle Sam, was an older man. He was a lot older than my grandparents, and he was not in good health. But I remember him talking to us, and he would slip into Italian. So that, if I could live that day again, I don't really think about living days again. But that was a great day for the Catanzaros. And then I can't tell you what my sisters and my mom and dad did other than that ice block story. But I had a good day. So.
Well, same type of idea. If there's a fond memory or thing you could relive a day from when my brother, sister, and I were around, the 5 of us were a family, is there a time that you think was the happiest and you'd love that moment and you'd want to redo it again if given the opportunity?
Well, I don't know that you'd think it was the happiest, but the trip to California that we took, and you remember you burned your fingertips on hot water, and we had to find, but that whole trip, and then is that the same time Danny broke his, there were so many bad things that day. Maybe I want to relive it because I want to make it better. But Danny broke his arm. We went to that crazy California hospital where they kept asking me, "Do you speak Spanish? Do you speak Spanish?" No. But, I didn't know California then. And I probably wasn't even really aware of how much Hispanic culture is out there. But still in all, there were moments like when we went to Disneyland and when we visited the Wrights and just driving up and down the coast and listening to all those books on tapes in that white van. And I think that would be a day if you could relive it, but I'm happy it happened.
So this will be the last question. Let's say that my great-great-grandchildren watch this, your great-great-great-grandchildren, and they want to read a book. of yours?
Of mine?
Of course, because we've talked about writing as such a thing. I mean, some of them might need to be of a certain age to read them.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean,
all of them.
which of your writings are you want to hand people? You'd say, oh yeah, start with this one.
I would probably the group I'm working on now, which is called the Loon Lake, Loving Loon Lake, or something like that. It's set in Des Moines, and it's about aging seniors who are all retired. And so far, there's 3 books. There might be a 4th, but they're light, meaning easy to read. You do have to be a certain age to read them. My great grandchildren. Although by then, who knows what Maury's will be like by then. But anyway, I really like those books, and I think it was cool that I did that because the first series that I wrote, the Resilience series, I like those books, but they're very heavy. I mean, you gotta, be open to a lot of heavy issues at this point. Maybe not in my great grandchildren's time frame, but mental illness and breast cancer and losing your focus on what you really want, and I don't know. The last book is coming up, and that's one with the rock star in it. But anyway, yeah, those would be the ones. And who knows, maybe that one called Figuring It Out, maybe that'll be my bestseller because I'll have told everyone how to live with breast cancer. I don't know.
Well, thanks, Mom. Appreciate you sitting down.
I love you, Patrick.